Welcome everyone, I'm the Hero and today we'll be discussing the 2.5D run and gun, Contra Operation Galuga. Now, you might be asking, is this the catalyst for the revival the genre has been waiting for? No. Well, is it at least a sign that Konami is willing to put out good games again? Maybe. Okay, but is it good? Yes. Alright, that's it. Review's over. See you all next month with Shadow the Hedgehog. What? You're still here? Okay, fine, I'll do my job. Contra Operation Galuga was developed by WayForward and published by Konami in 2024 for the Juego Estación 4 y 5, Xbox S and Xbox X, as well as PC and the Nintendo Switch. The game acts as a remake of the first Contra, or Grisor if you may, from 1988, whilst also serving as a sort of soft reboot for the series at large. The game boasts a fairly decently sized roster of playable characters featuring old friends and new friends and hey, wait a second, you're not a bear! Each coming with their own quirks and caveats which I'll touch upon later. Now, not to turn this into an examination of the series' gameplay design trajectory through the years or a backdoor review of 3, but it is necessary to make mention of that much to my dismay, Operation Galuga, or COG as I shall refer to it henceforth in favor of time, takes after 3. But why would you not like that, you may ask? To which my answer is to demonstrate my ability to transform into a grey muzzle at will despite being in my mid-20s quite vividly. Ah shit, I'm in my mid-20s. But Contra 3 doesn't quite feel like Contra in a major point of its basic design. You see, one quite major difference between Contra and Metal Slug was that in Contra regular fodder enemies only needed to be hit by a single shot to be neutralized, while in Metal Slug screen fodder can take multiple shots to kill, but it is fine because the guns, levels and controls are designed around this. Sure, the random fodder might take 2 or more hits, but if they get too close, you automatically switch to your melee attack, which is a one-shot kill for those kinds of enemies specifically. Why am I bringing this all up? Because instead of further elaborating on the previous 2 games' enemy design, the Alien Wars opted to emulate Metal Slug and make its fodder enemies take multiple shots as well. But without any of the quality of life additions that make Metal Slug's design work, perhaps because at that point they would have been ripping it off wholesale. But what does this mean for COG? Well, as previously mentioned, nothing we haven't seen since the SNES, but unlike most games in the series since 3 made the Switch, COG tries to offer a fix. It features an option to play with a health bar to once more even the playing field between the player and CPU characters, which is not an ideal fix, but still much better than the alternative of just not having it, and since the game is by and large an amalgam of all the games that came before it, this was in some ways the only way to adapt since it has been a method tried previously in Shattered Soldier. All that being said, however, one way COG revolutionizes the series is by introducing a bit of modularity. The game has a shop where you can use in-game currency earned strictly through playing the game to buy modulators, which can be innate or equipable, and can range in use from gaining 1 more hit before losing a life to not losing weapons upon death to the Konami code, which, yes, you do have to input the Konami code on the title screen to unlock the privilege of being able to buy this. Once you have a couple of these mods, you can choose to enable 2 of them on your character on the character select screen, but your options don't end here. If you're not vibing with the new health bar, you can choose to play with one-hit kills on for you, and the game will even give you a boost in your earnings since it does make the game harder. Other major break from the series norm is that the characters feel different from one another. Now, don't expect major handling changes between them, but the game does have 2 options for each weapon upgrade, as well as character-specific mods that accentuate their differences in each case. These are things like Bill getting an invincible dash, Blance having been an undercover Brazilian all along revealing this information by gaining better double jumps, and things like these. Along these, the characters also get assigned a specific set of weapons, as we've previously discussed, but another major new addition are the breakaway moves each weapon upgrade gives you. These can range from stuff like giving you a shield to summoning a homing dragon to engaging true Toho mode for the enemies. All of these, the shot types, the breakaway moves, which movement mechanic is in the limelight, all of it hinges on your character choice. Some characters have double jumps, some focus on the dashes, some gain additional properties along with their air dashes, which, yeah, by the way, I forgot to mention, but we have air dashes now. Really, my only gripes with the game are, well, the perhaps obvious decision of making the fodder take multiple shots, as well as lack of any genre-breaking intermission stages, which I consider part of the series' identity, but I can also understand their absence due to a lack of budget for such undertakings. And honestly, I'd much rather this than the top-down twin-stick stuff from the later Contra games. And finally, the sluggish feeling movement. Contra's movement has always been teetering along the edge between responsive and cinematic, which is to say feeling good and feeling like, an acquired taste. But in the previous entries, the grounded movement felt completely fine and the jumping could be a bit floaty, but nothing too insufferable. COG doesn't make things particularly worse per se, but the characters definitely seem slower in their grounded movement. The jumping's floatiness was captured magnificently, it's on point. Meanwhile, the grounded movement now feels like you're moving through molasses unless you're dashing and air dashing constantly, which is definitely a fix, but imagine how much better the game would feel if we could move fast and head dashing. Preposterous, I know. Another small thing in relation to this is that either due to how the movement works or how firing your gun is registered, I'm incapable of doing these split-second 180-degree shots I used to be able to do in the OG Contra, which is a bit disappointing, but it's an understandable casualty of trying to recreate the feel and quirks of a 36-year-old game in a modern setting. Some of these things you just wouldn't think of in a million years during production, and rightfully so it's whatever. I feel like it's also necessary to touch on the levels themselves, which are of course remakes of the original games, but with many twists. As previously mentioned, COG isn't just a remake of the original Contra, but a love letter to the entire series, warts and all, which means that instead of just straight remakes, you get amalgams of various levels or level gimmicks from throughout the series. Jungle is still jungle, you just have the bars from Contra 4 in it, and you fight every wall boss in the end. Snowfall is still Snowfall, but now you're on a train or bike, and since you moved the Snowfall boss to jungle, you now fight the Energy Zone boss from one of his later appearances because I'm pretty sure this boss fight design for it has appeared before. The game doesn't just reuse themes and locales from the previous games, however, for if it couldn't fit a theme for reasons, it still goes out of its way to include the really memorable level design just reskinned to make it sense in its new context. Now, this has led to one of my favorite bits from the OG Contra being in my least favorite level in COG, but at least the lab serves as a fine replacement for Hangar, so it's not all losses. But we spent some time talking about kinda in-depth stuff, so you'd assume that's all we have, right? Like, WayForward just made an arcade-style Rangon since that's mostly what the genre has ever been. And it's just fanservice to relative old heads like me who've played the shit out of the original and maybe even the later games, right? Well, you see, there's something I've been withholding from you. You see, and this might be awkward, but you're adopted. Also, Operation Galuga has a story mode. That too. COG's story mode is an unexpected but very much welcome surprise. It even comes with the seldom-seen capability of watching the budget exit the game in real time. Now, as much as I might poke fun at the understandable constraints placed upon the game, the story mode is very much good in many regards, at least within the context of what it is housed in. The events of the original Contra play out fairly similarly to how they did in the original, assuming you own a Japanese copy and can speak Japanese, but adjusted to fit in their new OCs to give the player a larger roster, as well as tying not just 1 and 3 together much more clearly, but also giving context to hardcore, which is a win, both because the more obviously canon that Michael Bay Manus is, the better it is, but also because it means we also get hardcore characters in COG, and the transformation of Bradley from being that guy that inexplicably gets dialogue to motherfucking Bradley Fang was still a surprise even though I knew he was in the game. By the way, as a side note, attaining Fang and the special ending tied to him and thus hardcore is so easy that I'd be more surprised if you didn't find it. Other note of a minor inconvenience is that Brownie isn't appropriately Gilu-sized, but then they would have had to re-rig just him and probably unfuck the animations, not to mention the difference in hit and hurt boxes and all that, so I can understand why they chose to make a regular sized robot in this one. Alright, well then, let's talk about the presentation. The menus are nothing to particularly write home about, but they serve their purpose just fine. The levels come with redone music, but heavily feature their old leitmotifs, and that's assuming they're not just the original songs redone with modern instrumentalization. That being said, the music that plays during the levels is yet another choice for you to make. While you can just use the soundtrack they made for this game, they also feature various other options if you go bored of that, such as the original game's soundtrack, remixed versions of the original game's soundtrack, various other Konami arcade games' soundtrack, or even just Castlevania music. You can unlock these with the money you acquire through playing the game as with any other mods, or you can also unlock the classic and Castlevania soundtracks by owning their respective games' classic collection on the same platform as COG. As for the graphics, well, I mean, look, for me, these guys never look better than on the NES, because these nondescript thumbmen were a big part of my childhood. But even still, COG can, in places, leave something to be desired. Albeit this too, I could quite easily see coming down to either budget restraints or just orders from management. If Konami specifically asks for a 2.5D Contra game, then the argument of it looks cheap does little to justify spending money on getting well-made pixel art done. And at this point, I'm not quite sure which of the two is considered the more economic. That being said though, this does not mean that they didn't do a great job with what they have. The game looks consistent enough, and there is this level where the stage remake is playing the level with your view obscured, and your only means of being able to tell where you are being the crystals that render the game flipped on various axes, which makes my brain blue screen and my PC piss and shit and come. But that's a bonus, I guess. So overall, how is Contra Operation Galuga? Good. But to elaborate, it is a welcome addition to the series that celebrates its history and showcases that WayForward understands the series, if that was even up for debate after Contra 4, despite Konami being Konami. The new movement options and modularity really set this game apart. The breakaway moves are the nice secondary option so that you might get some use out of even the weapons that you generally dislike, and you get to play as Bradley Fang. What more do you need? So really, there's but one question left to answer. Why?